Hey guys, Canadian Range Nut here. It is Friday, June the 23rd, 2022. Some of the things we're going to talk about today, I want to share a few sound bits and video of the RCMP scandal that's going on with the RCMP Commissioner and the Liberal government. I'm going to talk a bit about Bill C21. Briefly going to mention Bill C11, just a brief clip about where that could potentially lead as far as censorship goes. Going to talk about a Burlington, Ontario carjacking that just happened. Quick video from Tamara Lich again. Tucker Carlson talks about the Republicans and gun rights in the States. And finally, the last two things will be talking about the Supreme Court shutting down a New York ruling that was not allowing people to carry handguns. So I'll get more into that when we get to the video. And finally, I don't know if you know who this is, but Dan Bongino, he used to be a former White House security guy, and he has his own talk show now, but he mentions his thoughts on Uvalde. So I'm going to get right into it here. So this first clip is in the House of Commons. This is Candice Bergen basically taking it to Bill Blair and telling the government that there should be an investigation into what happened with the RCMP. And if you don't know what happened with the RCMP, there's rumors that the Liberal government, back when there was the mass shooting in Nova Scotia in 2020, apparently the Liberal government had pressured the RCMP Commissioner to release the types of weapons that were used by the killer to the public, and one of the superintendents in the RCMP had refused to do so. And now that they're doing an inquiry into that mass shooting, all this stuff is coming out now. So just take a listen.
Accusations that the Prime Minister used the Nova Scotia mass shooting to advance his political agenda are extremely troubling. We believe Superintendent Darren Campbell when he says that Commissioner Lucki pressured the RCMP to reveal certain information. We also believe that it's possible the Commissioner was pressured by the PMO and Public Safety Minister's office. These Liberals have a pattern of interfering in investigations to advance their political agenda, just like we saw in SNC-Lavalin. Will the government commit today to a full and open and transparent investigation to get to the bottom of this?
Well, Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
Okay, so this is Bill Blair responding.
Law enforcement operations is a key principle of our democracy, and it's one that our government deeply respects and one that I have always defended. At no point, Mr. Speaker, did our government pressure or interfere in the operational decisions of the RCMP. And I would take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to direct the members to the Commissioner's statement from yesterday, in which he makes it very...
And by the way, when he's doing this, he has a piece of paper in front of him, and he's basically reading off of a statement.
...clear that there was no interference. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, somebody is not telling the truth, and it is not Superintendent Darren Campbell. Mr. Speaker, he did not just experience this differently. We know the Liberals have a track record of interfering in investigations when it's to their advantage, and when they're caught, they deny, then they deflect, and then they blame. It's sickening to think that they're using the worst mass shooting in Canadian history for political gain, but it is very possible. We need to get to the truth on this, Mr. Speaker. Again, I'm going to ask the Minister, I'm going to ask the government, will they commit to a full and an open investigation?
The Honourable Minister.
And it's hilarious to see the Liberal side of the House of Commons. Literally every single Liberal is still wearing a mask. The other side, the Conservatives, you might have like one or two MPs who are wearing masks. I just find it laughable, and it's such theater.
To share with the members opposite the truth. And in fact, yesterday, the Commissioner of the RCMP released a statement in which she said, and I quote, it is important to note that the sharing of information and briefings with the Minister of Public Safety are necessary, particularly during a mass shooting on Canadian soil. This is standard procedure and does not impact the integrity of ongoing investigations or interfere with the independence of the RCMP. And she concludes, and this is important, Mr. Speaker, I take the principle of police independence extremely seriously, and it has been and will continue to be fully respected in all interactions.
And just to give you some more details about the mass shooting that happened, so the guy who did it basically killed, I think it was 22 Canadians, so 22 civilians, and he did it with 2 semi-automatic handguns and 2 semi-automatic rifles, which of course he obtained illegally in the United States. And the reason the RCMP, the superintendent, did not want to release the names of these guns was because they were still doing an investigation across the border. And he thought that, and that would have jeopardized the investigation. And the commissioner apparently was really pissed off at this fact. And now, again, all this stuff is starting to come out. So the Conservatives are putting a lot of heat on the Liberals right now. Is anything going to come out of this? Who knows? Usually the elites, nothing ever happens to them. I feel like a lot of times we're watching a big show, but I guess time will tell.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Deny, deflect, and blame, Mr. Speaker.
The mass murder of 22 of my fellow Nova Scotians and an unborn child.
So this is Rick Perkins. He's a Conservative MP.
Being used as a Liberal gun control wedge is disgusting, obscene, and an insult to the victims and their families. The detailed investigative notes of RCMP officers, which will be used in court, state political interference into this mass murder.
So what he's talking about is the superintendent had taken handwritten notes for himself, I guess, when the RCMP commissioner was pressuring him to release the names of those guns in the press conference. So that's what they're actually using in the court investigation.
Contradicted by the public safety minister and the commissioner of the RCMP. Who's telling the truth? The RCMP investigators or the Liberal politicians trying to interfere in the investigation?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like again to direct my honourable colleague to the Commissioner's statement, which I believe speaks for itself. The decision as to what information will be publicly disclosed regarding any investigation, as well as all operational matters, lies always and solely with the police. But Mr. Speaker, let me also take the opportunity to acknowledge that the 2020 mass shootings in Nova Scotia has devastated families and communities, and particularly those families and loved ones of the 22 individuals that lost their lives. We should all keep them in our thoughts.
You gotta love how they try to virtue signal at the end, and basically he keeps returning to the same answer over and over. And I know they all do this, but I feel like the Liberals are just the worst at doing that.
Honourable Member for Cumberland Colchester. Mr. Speaker, many in Nova Scotia are already concerned about the proceedings of the Mass Casualty Commission. Superintendent Campbell testified, and I quote, "The Commissioner said she had promised the Minister of Public Safety and the Prime Minister's office that the RCMP would release this information. The Commissioner then said that we didn't..."
So if you guys didn't catch that, Superintendent Campbell had said that the RCMP Commissioner had promised the Liberal government that they would release the information of the guns.
Understand that this was tied to pending gun control legislation. Mr. Speaker, 22 individuals and an unborn baby died in my riding during this tragedy. We believe Superintendent Campbell. Does the Minister?
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There's Bill Blair again.
I've never had a conversation with the superintendent, but the commissioner who did release the statement in which he said, "It's important to note that the sharing of information and briefings with the Minister of Public Safety are both necessary and particularly during a mass shooting on Canadian soil. This is standard procedure. It does not impact the integrity of any ongoing investigation or interfere with the independence of the RCMP." And she concluded, "I take the principle of police independence extremely seriously, and it has been and will continue to be fully respected in all interactions."
Member for Cumberland Colchester. Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government has somehow managed to use politics to interfere with a cross-border police investigation. They hoped it would advance their potential.
So this guy's name is Stephen Ellis, another Conservative MP.
Gun control legislation. This interference further undermined the public confidence in the police investigation as to how the killer managed to obtain and smuggle illegal guns into Canada. How long after this tragedy did the minister discuss the gun legislation and the resulting order in council, which happened 10 days later, with Commissioner Lucki?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would remind the member that we actually campaigned in 2019 on our promise to Canadians that we would strengthen gun control and that we would ban assault-style rifles. Mr. Speaker, in May of 2020, we kept that promise. But, Mr. Speaker, the independence of law enforcement operations remains a key principle of our democracy. It's one our government has always respected and one that I have always defended. Mr. Speaker, at no point did our government pressure or interfere in any of the operational decisions of the RCMP.
Well, there you have it. So you can make the call for yourself. Now, I think he's full of crap. Again, I could be wrong, but based on this government's track record, I think we kind of know where this is leaning. Okay, this next clip here is an interview done. The reporter is interviewing a Liberal MP named Talib Noor Mohammed and a Conservative MP Raquel Dancho. I would mess her name up all the time. So take a listen to this one, and then again, this is about the accused interference of the Liberals. Here we go.
Noor Mohammed is in Ottawa, and in Winnipeg, Conservative public safety critic Raquel Dancho. Hi to both of you. Thank you very much for making the time. Mr. Noor Mohammed, I'll start with you. Did any member of your government or any of their staff ever tell Brenda Lucki or her staff to make sure details of the weapons used in the mass shooting in Nova Scotia were made public? And did you tie that to upcoming gun control legislation?
I love her direct question right away.
Well, actually, first of all, I mean, this is an important and difficult time for the folks, the families and others that were first traumatized by the incident, and of course being re-traumatized.
Do you remember when Candice Bergen was accusing the Liberals of deflecting? Well, here we go.
Traumatized by the NCC. Look, our government is not in the business of scoring political points at the expense of Canadian tragedies. That's not what this is about. And the RCMP, as you well know, does not take their direction from the federal government. The RCMP operates independently, and that independence is critical to ensuring that our public safety and our parliamentary systems are protected in the way that they are.
Respectfully, Mr. Noor Mohammed, that doesn't answer the question. Did your government at any point...
Ooh, I gotta say, I really love her. I don't know what her name is, but I love how she's taken it to him.
Tell RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki to make sure that details of the weapons used in the shooting were made public, were told to the media, and did you tie that to upcoming gun control legislation? Is the answer no? Is that what you're saying?
The minister made that very clear today, and I think it's very important that Canadians understand that we are not in the business.
There's more deflecting again.
Of China scoring cheap political points at the expense of a Canadian tragedy. That is not
And there's the blaming part.
Reasonable thing for any government.
So are you saying that the Superintendent Darren Campbell, who recalled this in his notes in the document that was made public today, is not telling the truth?
I'm saying that I, like you, heard what the minister said today, and the minister made it very clear.
Deflect.
That at no point in time was Commissioner Lucki directed to do anything in this regard by the Department of Public Safety. And the RCMP Commissioner is free to speak to and give direction to her staff and her team as she chooses, but she does that as an independent individual and not as some kind of instrument of the federal government.
So she never said, quote unquote here, she had promised the Minister of Public Safety and the Prime Minister's office that the RCMP would release this information. She never said that.
I mean, again, as I said, the minister was asked the question today in the House. The minister's on record saying that at no point in time was the Commissioner of the RCMP pressured to do that.
Okay, Ms. Dancho, my apologies.
So Danko is the Conservative here?
A party, as we heard in that exchange, was certainly, and I should say this was first reported by the Halifax Examiner today, based on documents released to the inquiry, is criticizing the government for doing this. You heard what your colleague here just said, echoing the minister's comments. They're denying that they ever told the RCMP to do this. Do you have any reason to believe otherwise, or should you just take them at their word?
I would say it's according to the Nova Scotia Superintendent Vashi, who is a fairly high-ranking and reputable official in Nova Scotia, who is making the claim, who is alleging that during a meeting with the commissioner of the RCMP, the commissioner had said to him and to others that she had promised the Prime Minister's office and the Public Safety Minister's office that she would get this information released. What's being alleged is that it was for the purpose of leveraging a horrific tragedy for the political gain of the Liberal government. And one thing I will agree with my colleague here is that this is devastating news for the families impacted by this tragedy. 22 people were tragically murdered. And in the heat of that first week, when there was an ongoing critical criminal investigation, we are learning or alleging, it is being alleged, that the Prime Minister's office and the Public Safety Minister's office were attempting to leverage that for their own political gain and interfere with a criminal investigation. Incredibly serious and shocking allegations that need to be investigated. The Conservative Party will be moving forward with every tool at our disposal to get to the bottom of this. This needs to be investigated. We need to have these individuals mentioned in this story testify to get the full story.
Again, based on the Liberal track record, I really hope that there is an investigation into this stuff. Not that I believe anything's going to come out of it, but I mean, if something doesn't come out of this, people need to lose their shit, because even Tracy Wilson from the CCFR was talking about how, you know, Jagmeet was blaming the Liberals for inflation, blah 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 blah. And she was basically calling him out, saying, you know, if you are so against the Liberal government, perhaps you should cancel the deal that the NDP made with the Liberals. And none of this really surprises me. We're talking about a government here who froze people's bank accounts for donating to a trucker convoy. Now, whether you believe in the trucker convoy or not, I do. I believe they made a positive change. The fact that they were able to freeze bank accounts of donors to this cause sets a really dangerous precedent. And if you have to think big picture, because once they were allowed to do that, any cause the government thinks is, quote, dangerous or that they don't agree with, they would be able to freeze the funds of anybody just by invoking that Emergency Act. So let's keep listening here.
Look, if the government if you take them at their word and there was no direction provided, and Commissioner Lucki is the one who told the group that assembled that, in fact, all these things that are being reported, that she was being pressured, or that she not pressured, that she did make a promise rather, and that it was tied to gun control legislation. Should her job sort of be in jeopardy? Like, do you think, does the responsibility fall on her?
Well, on one account of what you said, I don't think it's easy for the public to trust this government. We see a critical pattern emerging here. We saw similar behavior and denial of wrongdoing during the SNC-Lavalin scandal. There was denial at that time, and we know how that turned out. So I would say that they don't get the benefit of the doubt in this regard. It is being alleged that there was serious political interference from the highest level of government to direct the RCMP to reveal critical information about an ongoing investigation of the worst mass killing in Canadian history within a week of that happening. I think that's shocking news. It would seem that the RCMP commissioner was acting on direction from the Prime Minister's office. That's why we need to get to the bottom of this, Vashi, and ensure that these individuals testify before committee and that the truth is revealed and justice is served to those accountable if this is true and these allegations prove to be true during that testimony.
Mr. Noor Mohammed, I note that you and the minister denied that any direction was provided. So let's take that off the table for a second. Can you tell Canadians watching tonight that there were no discussions between staff members in the PMO or the public safety minister or his staff members and the commissioner of the RCMP during the time or thereafter of the shooting that involved upcoming gun control legislation? Was gun control legislation ever discussed in this context?
Actually, I think I'm very concerned to hear my colleague even assert that our government would seek to play politics with the
Here's another deflection.
Tragedy. This is not how our government operates. It's not how we have operated in the past. It's not how we're going to operate in the future. The idea that somehow there is a group of people that are sitting in a room going, oh, let's find a way to capitalize on the mass murder of Canadians is absolutely appalling and it should be condemned this strong.
Why wouldn't they capitalize on that? They capitalized on this thing that happened in Uvalde to get to ban the handguns, right? So
as possible terms that should someone even contemplate making an accusation like that. The fact of the matter is that the RCMP work independently of the federal government. And as a former public servant who worked in the Department of Public Safety, I can tell you, having worked with past commissioners of the RCMP, it is not, the RCMP is very clear about not becoming a political tool of the government, regardless of who is in power. And I think it is important for us to stop undermining the institutions that keep this country safe.
Oh, here comes the blaming part. Stop undermining the institutions. Wait a sec. I thought these institutions had a lot of systemic racism in it. So now you're going to back the institutions. Well, which one is it? This is the problem with this liberal government. It's always a flip flop. There's never any principles involved, and they go wherever the wind blows.
Respectfully, this isn't just drawn out of thin. I'll get your response in a second, Ms. Dancho, but this isn't just drawn out of thin air. The reason that we're doing this segment is because of the reporting that is based on a document that was released in the inquiry today. I understand that there are many politics at play around the issue of gun control normally, right? But this was notes taken by an RCMP superintendent. I'm gathering from what you're saying that you're denying that direction was given, that the RCMP operates independently, fine. Are you also saying that there was no discussion of upcoming gun control legislation in the context of the shooting with the RCMP?
Just to be clear, I cannot imagine a scenario in which at that time there would have been a conversation between the RCMP and political staff about how to capitalize on an ongoing tragedy that was in play in order to fulfill a legislative goal. It makes no sense that would transpire. I mean, think about.
Well, actually, it makes perfect sense, because if you're a government with an agenda, you're going to basically do whatever it takes to put that agenda into motion.
Timelines, think about process. Nobody works in that way logically, but most importantly, ethically, that's not how people work.
And Ms. Dancho, I'll give you the last word. I know that there is the account of the superintendent, but given the words of your colleague, given the words of the minister, they are saying that this was, there wasn't a political discussion going on. Do you accept that too could be true?
If they're so confident that that is the case, I mean, and frankly, for all Canadians, I hope that they're telling the truth. But if that is the case, then they should have no issue bringing forward these individuals to committee to testify. I sit on the committee with my honorable colleague on this panel. If he feels so confident, I would assume that he would support us bringing forward all of these witnesses to testify so that we can learn the truth and Canadians can learn the truth about this allegation, which again, very, very serious. It's being alleged, just to sum it up, that the Prime Minister's office and the Public Safety Minister's office interfered in a criminal investigation for their own political gain. That we need to get to the bottom of that, and I hope that my colleague on this panel supports it. He should, if he's as confident as he says he is.
I'm out of time.
And again, if they're not afraid of anything, they should be willing to go through the investigation, because it's a pretty big accusation that is being made. And it seems that there is sufficient evidence to support an investigation into this. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few days.
But Mr. Noor Mohammed, would you support an investigation through that committee?
I think there's an important investigation ongoing right now. I think our committee does excellent work, and if it ends up in our committee, look, I think it's important for us to ask the questions, get the right answer.
That's up to you, though. That's up to you.
Okay.
Not about score.
Okay, I'm out of time. I appreciate both of you making the time for this. Thank you.
Okay, we'll stop it there. Okay, this next segment, we're back in the House of Commons again. This is more directly dealing with Bill C21, and this is from Blaine Calkins. He's an MP, conservative MP, and he used to be a law enforcement officer. So it'll be interesting to hear his take. Here we go.
The NDP Liberals' most recent attempt to scapegoat law-abiding firearms owners and to trick the average Canadian into believing that they are trying to improve public safety while doing absolutely no such thing.
I'm going to stop it there for a sec, because really that is what they're doing. They are tricking the average Canadian. I know as law-abiding firearms owners, we know what their game is. Unfortunately, we are the minority, right? Most people don't own a gun in this country, are not licensed in this country, and our are ignorant to this fact, and the Liberals are trying to play on that, right? And again, I've spoken to many people who think, oh, well, you don't need any handguns. Why should you have one? And they just have that mentality, and they won't even bother to look into it, right? So that's why it's important for us as licensed gun owners to constantly talk about it and not be afraid to talk about it. Now, obviously, there's some like in your workplace and stuff like that, if it's not appropriate to talk about it, if you're afraid to lose your job or something, which I think is ridiculous, but we have to be realistic here, right? Then obviously it's not the best place to talk about it. But friends, family, and stuff like that, I think we need to get a little bit more ballsy as far as talking about our sport and talking about our rights as gun owners. Here we go.
If you look at the balance of this government's agenda on public safety and justice, they seem content to undermine both of these departments and the essential institutions that support them. This is being done in order to virtue signal and play petty politics to the detriment of our entire society. And
just so you guys know, he is from Red Deer, Alberta.
While this is deeply disappointing, it is hardly surprising. This government is light on substantive policy solutions, heavy on press conferences, and so-called alternative facts. Today, additional details came to light about this government and the Prime Minister's interference in the tragic Nova Scotia mass murder investigation in order to try and create a narrative that would fit their political agenda. This is important because it speaks to the foundation on which substantive parts of the Liberals' firearms policy rest upon, including parts of the bill C21, which we are currently debating.
And I love how the Conservatives are just constantly taking the Liberals to task on this. The NDP, I notice, is very quiet on these issues.
Mr. Speaker, the Halifax Examiner reported yesterday that RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki made a promise to Public Safety Minister at the time and the Prime Minister's office to leverage the mass murders of April 18th and 19th, 2020 to get a gun control law passed. To be clear, that was the former Public Safety Minister who is now the current Minister of Emergency Preparedness. The article makes it clear that the Commissioner, being pressured by the Prime Minister's office and now the Minister of Emergency Preparedness to ensure that information was released that would help them politically to the detriment and the potential jeopardy of the ongoing investigation. As a former police chief, you would expect better from the Minister of Emergency Preparedness. However, maybe this is how he has always operated. Mr. Speaker, this is a pattern of behavior.
And he's talking about Bill Blair.
Behavior with this Prime Minister. He puts the interests of himself first, the Liberal Party second, his donors and insider friends third, and then if there's time and the chance for a really good photo op, he might try and do something that actually helps a few Canadians. Mr. Speaker, this is an example of the first two. He was willing to interfere with the ongoing police investigation in order to try and leverage a political edge. This used to be unimaginable, but given the Prime Minister's SNC-Lavalin track record, this is totally in line with his character. The way you do one thing, Mr. Speaker, is the way you do everything. And I want to read part of this article because it's important and deserves to be heard in this place. Nova Scotia Superintendent Darren Campbell wrote about a meeting he had with Commissioner Lucki that the Commissioner was obviously upset. She did not raise her voice, but her choice of words was indicative of her overall dissatisfaction with our work. The Commissioner accused us of disrespecting her by not following her instructions. I was and remain confused over this. The Commissioner said she told comms to tell us at H Division to include specific info about the firearms used by the killer. However, I said we couldn't because to do so would jeopardize ongoing efforts to advance the U.S. side of the case as well as the Canadian components of the investigation. Those are the facts, and I stand by them.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there for a second. Keep in mind, too, when the shooting happened in April 2020, I mentioned this in my last video, and I played an actual clip from it. Suddenly, 2 months later, a lot of this stuff is kind of making sense, because 2 months later, all of a sudden, this RCMP Commissioner Lucki was all of a sudden talking about systemic racism in the RCMP. Again, another one of the liberal narratives. Everything is inherently bad. It's just, there's racism in everything. That's the leftist point of view, right? Let's just continue here.
Those are the words of Superintendent Campbell. And might I add, Mr. Speaker, every police officer carries with them an evidence notebook. I, as a former law enforcement officer back in the 1990s, still have today my evidence notebooks in case I need to recall facts about events that happened while I was on duty. Campbell noted that Lucki went on at length, and she was sad and disappointed that he had not provided these details to the media. Campbell continued, the Commissioner said she had promised the Minister of Public Safety and the Prime Minister's office that the RCMP would release this information. I tried to explain there was no intent to disrespect anyone, however, we could not release this information at this time. The Commissioner then said that we didn't understand that this was tied to pending gun control legislation that would make officers and the public safer. She was very upset, and at one point, Deputy Commissioner Brian Brennan tried to get things calmed down, but that had little effect. Some in the room were reduced to tears and emotional over this belittling reprimand. Mr. Speaker,
I just have to say, I read the article to you guys when I filmed a couple days ago. I like how he reads it much better, just saying.
The article makes it clear that this wasn't the only way the government interfered with this investigation and the release of information, pressuring the Commissioner to break agreed-upon protocols. The article also attributes a quote to Leah Scanlon, Communications Director for the RCMP, to which is said, the Commissioner releases a body count that we don't even have. She went out and did that. It was all political pressure. That is 100% Minister and the Prime Minister.
Yes, and I remember reading about that. At one point, they were saying there were 13 people killed. It ended up being 22. Then they were saying 10 people killed. Then they were saying it was just an RCMP officer who was killed. And if you're wondering why they would do this, well, they want to get this information out, whether it's factual or not, because they obviously wanted public support for the so-called quote assault ban that happened through the OIC, and literally it happened 10 days later after these shootings took place, and that's where your AR-15s were banned. You weren't able to use them anymore, and that they're planning this whole buyback thing.
And we have a Commissioner that does not push back. Mr. Speaker, those are the words of RCMP Officer Scanlon, the Communications Director Scanlon, and it is deeply concerning that the Commissioner would not push back against the government on this request, but it's completely and totally unacceptable that she should ever have had to. I can only surmise that she is all too familiar with what happens to women who speak truth to power to this Prime Minister and his underlings. Mr. Speaker, this is the foundation on which C21 was constructed. Political pressure and interference in the RCMP, misinformation about the perpetrators of gun violence, and naked political opportunism. The bill was also announced on the heels of an American tragedy, deliberately importing American political discourse into domestic Canadian policies. The Prime Minister seems to be confused about the impact of Canadian legislation on U.S. or American society, to which there is virtually none. Unless he is announcing his plan to run for President of the United States, he should start trying to address the issues that Canadians face, not American issues here in Canada. The firearms regimes in our two countries, Canada and the United States, are completely different. It's been made clear the mass murderer from Texas would not be able to get a gun in Canada. In most U.S. states, a 21-year-old American with no convictions can purchase a firearm, and in pretty much every state carry it. In about half of them, they could carry concealed with limited regulations. That is not the reality in Canada, Mr. Speaker. I am a law-abiding firearms owner. And in Canada, you need to take a firearm safety course, apply for a license, submit yourself to a background check, not only on your initial application, but on every reapplication every 5 years, in which the RCMP can contact former conjugal partners, wait for that information to come back for a few months, and then, maybe then, you can go purchase your firearm and abide by stringent safe storage and transport laws. That is the reality in Canada. Every day, Mr. Speaker, my ability to continue to own or possess firearms is checked against the Canadian Police Information Centre's database to ensure that I am still legally and lawfully able to. If only, Mr. Speaker, the government of the day would spend as much time following up on people who are prohibited from possessing or acquiring firearms, spend as much time policing our borders and making sure that the people on our borders had the tools and equipment that they needed, and spent as much time in this chamber actually focused on criminals who commit crimes, who shoot guns in our urban centers, in our communities, in our rural areas as well, who have no respect for the law and no respect for human life. That is not the case with the 2.1 million law-abiding Canadian firearms owners in our country. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the data clearly says the opposite. If you are going to be harmed by somebody in this country with a firearm, the vast majority of that harm is coming from somebody who is not licensed to have the firearm in the first place. Mr. Speaker, every gun in this country is illegal unless it's in the possession of somebody licensed to do so. We have the best firearms laws in the world, and I'll put that up against the record of any other country, and it's shameful that this government is importing U.S. politics into Canada to sell misinformation to the voters of this country and disenfranchise law-abiding Canadian citizens. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I gotta say, I love that guy. I think that last minute and a half there, if you have friends or family members who are, who think this gun bill is going to do a lot for Canada, I just play that last clip for them. Now, that's not to say they're going to listen to it, but if they're open to it, yeah, play that clip for them. Then you're going to get some people who you're never going to convince no matter what, and which is fine too, but at least we have to at least try. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to share this article that I found from CHCH News. This took place in Ontario. Just speaking of what that last MP was talking about, how this government does not like to punish real criminals. It's just easier to go after law-abiding citizens. Title of this article, Pair in their 20s charged in gunpoint carjacking in Burlington. So we're talking Burlington, Ontario here. Two people in their 20s are facing multiple charges following a gunpoint carjacking in Burlington Tuesday evening. Halton police said it happened just before 5 p.m., so there we go, another broad daylight scenario, when a woman was getting into her 2020 Range Rover that was parked in an office parking lot near North Service Road and Burloak Drive. A male suspect holding a gun approached the woman and ordered her out of the vehicle. A second female suspect was waiting in a gray Dodge Journey. Both suspects fled the area in the stolen Range Rover and the Dodge Journey. No injuries were reported during the incident. Shortly after, the Range Rover was involved in a collision near Upper Middle Road and Sutton Drive. The male suspect was seen running away from the crash. Police arrived at the scene and found the man. Officers also found a gun in the stolen vehicle. There's a shocker. And how much you want to bet these guys have been arrested before? Around 5:30 p.m., police found the Dodge Journey driving in the area of Appleby Line and Mainway and then arrested the female suspect. Joshua Belshaw, 22, of St. Catharines, has been charged with 6 offenses, including robbery with a firearm. So again, name is Joshua Belshaw, 22. Kendra McLeod, 21, of Welland, is facing 3 charges, including possession of property obtained by crime. Again, her name is Kendra McLeod. Both were held in custody pending a bail hearing. And then it says, anyone with information regarding this investigation is asked to contact the 3 District Criminal Investigation Bureau at 905-825-4777, extension 2316. I love how these guys are having a bail hearing. It's just great to know that, you know, somebody who's willing to carjack you at gunpoint can get out on bail. And I bet you any money it's not even going to cost them that much to get on bail. That's what I think, in my opinion, just based on the way our Canadian justice system works. Okay, this next clip is this one is very short. This is just a quick clip about C11, and this is an expert talking about how if you don't know what C11 is, it's basically the Liberals trying to push through an internet, basically a censorship bill, and it would control what YouTube creators do. It could potentially change the algorithm. So say you were looking for something, a certain content, or maybe you wanted to, you know how the algorithms work. It'll, like, say you like guns, and the YouTube algorithm will realize that and send you more videos on guns. This will prevent that kind of thing. So just take a listen to what this guy has to say. Now, I think it passed, but I think it still has to go through the Senate. So this is just a quick little clip.
And I think there will be a number of ways that the industry can do it. I'll give you simple examples. Instead of saying, and the Act precludes this.
So he's talking manipulating algorithms to prevent you from seeing certain things.
We will make changes to your algorithms, as many European countries are contemplating doing. Instead, we will say, this is the outcome we want. We want Canadians to find Canadian music. How best to do it? How will you do it? I don't want to manipulate your algorithm. I want you to manipulate it to produce a particular outcome.
So that's basically just a quick snippet of what could happen if Bill C11 does go through. It's very disturbing. Now, a lot of people say, oh, what's the big deal? You know, we don't want misinformation getting out. Free speech doesn't mean real free speech means you're going to have access to things you might not like, maybe things that are incorrect and misinformation and stuff like that. But you need to be a critical thinker yourself and decipher what's real. And it kind of sucks. Like, even, back in the day, I used to watch CNN a lot. Like, we're talking like back in 1999. I remember when Clinton had started bombing Serbia, and I had a few Serbian friends, and I didn't want to fight with them, so I was just like, oh, okay. But they were always very pro-Serbia. They're like, oh, you don't know what's going on there. And one of my friends had gotten into a fight with her other friend, and they didn't talk for months. And I didn't know enough about the situation, but knowing what I know now, I look back at what happened in Serbia, and I'm just like, I tend to believe my Serbian friends as far as what happened with the bombing there. Because if you know now they have there's a statue of George Bush in Serbia, and it's basically a place for the U.S. to have a base, right? So I didn't realize until a couple of years ago that we have to look at multiple sources of things, and we have to question everything. And it really sucks that we do, but it's the only way that we're going to get to the truth, as opposed to having some big censor saying, oh, you can look at this, but you can't look at that. I remember at the beginning of COVID when, I don't know if you guys remember this, there were these YouTube doctors, and I'll admit they looked kind of cheesy, but when COVID first hit, they were expressing how we do need to get sick for our immune systems, to strengthen our immune systems. And I remember thinking, who do these guys think they are? You know what? They know better than everybody else. No, they just had the balls to say it. And I remember their video was taken off YouTube. And again, in the beginning, I thought they were crazy, but now I do realize, yeah, they're probably right. You don't shut down a whole society for a disease, no matter what it is, because the consequences of shutting down that society are going to be far worse. If you guys remember when Trump said the cure cannot be worse than the disease, and I like doing Trump impressions, like, the cure cannot be worse than the disease. But he's right, and it's true. You can't create something that's going to cause much more damage, like suicides, increased alcoholism, drugs, but we're going into an area where free speech is becoming less and less, and it's a very scary thing. And I would rather people say offensive things and be able to say maybe it is misinformation. I'd like to see it and judge for myself. I don't want some governing body to do that. You guys might agree, you might disagree. I'm thinking as licensed gun owners, you probably agree with me. Might be some who don't, which is cool too. Okay. Now I want to shift gears to the United States. So if you're in Canada, you have no interest in the US, that's fine. Feel free to switch off. Please remember to like or subscribe, guys, if you did get value out of this. But let's move to the US now. So this is a video I found from Tucker Carlson. And I got to say, I love Tucker. I don't know if he writes his stuff himself or whatever, but I find his sarcasm hilarious. And he's usually bang on with everything he's saying. Now, obviously, it's a conservative point of view. But sorry, the last few years, the liberal point of view, I feel like has been lying to us the entire time. Give you an example of that. I remember CBC, after the George Floyd killing, was interviewing some, I can't remember it was one of the cities, it was in Minnesota, I think. They were interviewing this restaurant owner who had one of his restaurants burned down. And the guy just, he seemed very happy about it. He was like, he was a new immigrant to the U.S. And he's like, I understand, I understand the anger. And I'm just like, okay, how much did these guys pay you that you understood this? Unless you're like a billionaire, that you're not going to care that your business was burnt down. That was another little sign that I realized what the hell is going on with our countries. So anyway, I'm going to play this from Tucker. This is about the American gun laws that they're trying to implement now after the Texas shooting.
Yesterday, just a few hours after the text of this gun confiscation bill was released, the Senate voted on it. Just a few hours. Why? Well, John Cornyn said there was simply no time to allow anyone to read the bill, even people voting on it, or to try to understand what was in it. A reporter last night overheard John Cornyn, again, a senator from Texas, a Republican, say this, and we're quoting, "It's only 80 pages long. How long do you need to read it?" Then John Cornyn appeared in front of cameras to explain.
I don't know about you guys. It takes me a while to read something with 80 pages, and I can imagine with the language, the legalese that they use in these documents, it would probably take a few days to read it, or at least a full day of really sitting down with it. And they do this all the time in the States, and they do it in Canada too. And even Canada, they were trying to push through Bill C21 as well. And they always try to push these things through so that there's no debate, and they just get it through, and there's no fight, and the law is passed.
Explained the Senate cannot pass this bill soon enough. Watch.
I don't want us to pass a bill for the purpose of checking a box. I want to make sure we actually do something useful, something that is capable of becoming a law, something that will have the potential to save lives. I'm happy to report, as a result of the hard work of a number of senators in this chamber, that we've made some serious progress. So soon, very soon, not soon enough for me, but very soon, we will see the text of bipartisan legislation that will help keep our children and our communities safer.
This is grotesque. Under ordinary...
behind Tucker, it just says has an elephant that says Republican betrayal.
Circumstances, you would just assume, as always, these people live in their own hermetically sealed world. They have no contact with reality. They have no idea how out of step they are. But given the context of this moment, you have to interpret it differently. What you just saw was effectively a speech in support of Joe Biden by a leader in a party whose job it is to offer an alternative to Joe Biden. It's enough to make your head spin. Just a few hours after Cornyn said that, the Senate voted to move forward with this bill. So what's in the bill? Well, there's $100 million for the FBI. For the FBI. No attempt to reform the FBI. We're shoveling another $100 million to the FBI, the personal police department of Joe Biden, the people who saved his son from a drug charge. Then there's nearly $1 billion in order to bribe the states to, quote, implement and manage these so-called red flag laws. Now, these laws allow authorities to seize firearms for people who have committed no crimes. That's a violation of due process. It's unconstitutional, but the Republican Party is all for it. The bill also makes it harder for people between the ages of 18 and 21 to buy a gun. They can go fight in Ukraine, and Republicans would like them to, but they can't own a gun in this country.
Great point right there, and I mentioned this in one of my other videos as well. If you're, and Dan Crenshaw talked about this too, if you're going to change the age that you can purchase the gun at, because obviously in the States you have to be 21 to drink, and a lot of people are saying, well, you shouldn't be able to buy an AR-15 if you can have a drink. Okay, well, if that's the case, then you better start changing the military laws. You better raise the age of joining the military to 21. And I love what he said about the Ukraine, because again, I've said this before, I don't know the exact details about what's going on in Ukraine, but what I can tell you is, for those who don't know, I went to one of the trucker convoy protests, not in Ottawa. I went in another area, and I remember it was all great people. I went by myself, so I didn't feel unsafe at all. Tons of people, supportive people, all supporting each other, cheering on these truckers. The minute the Canadian news started saying these truckers are racist, that they're violent, that they're extremists, I knew the news was full of crap. And once they announced the Russia invasion of Ukraine, I thought to myself, I don't believe a word that these news stations are saying, right? So I don't know the full details of the Russia stuff. I have some Serbian friends, actually, and if you don't know, Serbians are very pro-Russian. And they gave me some interesting takes on it as well. I don't want to get too much into that. But again, Tucker makes a good point here. It's okay to go fight in Ukraine and, go fight in Iraq, go fight in Afghanistan, but you can't own a gun in your own country. Something to really think about there.
Now, the question is, would any of these measures have stopped the mass shootings in Buffalo or Uvalde? No. This bill is completely unconnected from what happened in Buffalo or Uvalde. This is merely Joe Biden's agenda. Even Kevin McCarthy of California has refused to support it. So here you have Mitch McConnell, the lead Republican in the Senate, partnering with Chuck Schumer, the lead Democrat in the Senate, picking John Cornyn to carry the message, and getting it done before anyone can even read the bill. And then on the Senate floor, John Cornyn turns to one of the most partisan Democrats in that body, Alex Padilla of California, and says, next we'll do immigration. Now, he was caught saying this, so Cornyn's office came out today and said, oh, it's just a hilarious joke, get it? First we'll take your guns, then we'll send your tax dollars to Zelensky in Ukraine, a country you can't find on a map, and then we're going to give amnesty to tens of millions of illegal aliens living illegally in this country.
Oh, and by the way, I just thought of this too, and if I piss some people off through this, so be it. I find it interesting that the war in Ukraine is so bad that you see all these celebrities going to visit Zelensky. Like you see Ben Stiller just went there. He recently did a virtual speech to the University of Toronto in Canada. It's like, wait a sec, if this war is, obviously war is terrible, but if this war is as bad as they say it is, how are these celebrities going there? Now they're probably in a safe spot, whatever, but something is really fishy about this war. And again, I don't believe anything the media is telling us about it. Let's keep listening here.
To John Cornyn, that's all pretty funny. Does anyone who voted for John Cornyn in the state of Texas, the Republican state of Texas, agree that it's funny? Or even believe that it was a joke? How about the voters of South Carolina, Lindsey Graham's voters? After meeting in his office with a movie star to discuss the issue, they're pretty informed. Lindsey Graham also voted for gun confiscation last night.
He just, it's showing a picture of Lindsey Graham here with Matthew McConaughey, just to give you context there.
Not Ukraine. He voted to send more guns to Ukraine. But you can't have guns here. You Ukrainian? No, no guns for you. And at the same time, as we said, Lindsey Graham is telling you your moral duty is to support a country you can't locate on a map, but your Bill of Rights, your constitutional protections are no longer valid.
I just thought of another point. Sorry to interrupt again, guys. But, I find it hilarious that the same people who are against the Second Amendment in the United States tend to be the same people who would share a post on Facebook about Ukrainian citizens arming themselves and all that stuff. Meanwhile, the U.S. has been doing it since they came into creation, basically, with their Second Amendment, right? But I just find that hilarious. Like the hypocrisy is incredible. Like, oh, we don't need a Second Amendment in the U.S. But it's amazing, isn't it amazing that the Ukrainians are arming themselves and training themselves? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And there is nothing we shouldn't do for Kyiv. Not for Texas, for Kyiv. Here's Lindsey Graham.
The question is, can we do more? And should we do more? The answer is yes to both. As to my friends in the Pentagon, you told all of us that this war would last 3 or 4 days, that Kyiv would fall, that, the country would be overwhelmed by the Russian military. They were wrong. So, quite frankly, I trust President Zelensky's judgment about what would help him in real time more than anybody else on the planet right now.
So the priorities they articulate in public are so far from the priorities of Americans that you have to wonder what this is. It's not simply a betrayal of Republican voters. We often call it that. It's much more. It's a declaration of war against Republican voters. In fact, against voters. For the record, here's a complete list of the Republican senators who just voted for gun confiscation. They would include Senator John Cornyn of Texas, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Senator Susan Collins of Maine, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri, Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina, Mitt Romney of Utah, Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia. How do the West Virginians feel? Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Todd Young of Indiana. Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania was absent for the vote, but he came out in support of it. Now, many of those senators are from America's most conservative states. Indiana, Utah, Louisiana, West Virginia. What were the numbers in the last election in those states? In fact, every one of those states, except for the state of Maine, went for Donald Trump in 2020. You're seeing the color-coded maps of election results in those states on your screen right now. Some of them are entirely red. So again, if you care about democracy, you have to ask, how many of those voters went to the polls in the last election hoping, above all, to elect leaders who support gun confiscation of law-abiding Americans, red flag laws? Not very many. So what we're seeing here, to be clear, is a subversion of democracy. You get to vote for whomever you want in this country. It can be a Republican or a Democrat, a liberal, a conservative. But in the end, you're going to get the very same thing every time. Yesterday, just a
great point there. Look at what happened in Canada with that stuff too. You had a minority liberal government. Then you had the NDPs pretty close and the Conservatives pretty close. And what did the Liberals do? They basically made a coalition with the NDP government, and now the Liberals can basically do whatever the hell they want. Unless the NDP disagrees with them, and they've basically established that they're going to support all of the bills that the Liberals push through. And I'm pretty sure NDP voters probably weren't too happy about that. We know Conservative voters weren't too happy about that as well. But it's interesting in the States too. I remember Trump used to talk about the rhinos, if the RINO, Republican in name only. So again, like most politicians, I think, don't really care about the general public. I'm sure there are some. And keep in mind, Republicans are supposed to be like our conservatives, right? Like they're obviously much more conservative than our conservatives in Canada. In general, it's just a general statement. But you've got these people now, these Republicans going against their own voters, right? Because in these states that if these Republicans stated that they would put these rules forth, they probably wouldn't have won those states. Now, maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, comment. Just, let's have a debate on this issue. Okay, next issue in the United States. This is a quick video from Global. It says, U.S. Supreme Court rules Americans have the right to carry firearms in public. And this has to do with something that happened in New York. I'll just play it for you guys.
With its conservative majority, the Supreme Court ruled against the New York law which let a person carry a concealed gun in some places for self-defense, but only if the person proved a special need for it.
This decision isn't just reckless, it's reprehensible.
So she's the New York governor. And remember Cuomo, what an amazing governor he was. I'm being sarcastic, by the way.
It's not what New Yorkers want, and we should have the right of determination of what we want to do in terms of our gun laws in our state.
The case came about after 2 men in upstate New York were not able to get the concealed carry permits they wanted. They said that was unconstitutional. During oral arguments, several justices seemed to agree.
Why isn't it good enough to say I live in a violent area and I want to be able to defend myself?
So that's Brett Kavanaugh.
How is that consistent with the core right to self-defense, which is protected by the Second Amendment?
That's Justice Samuel Alito who said that.
New York statute was different than the law in 43 other states where it's easier to carry a gun outside the home. Skyler Henry, CBS News, the Supreme Court.
Okay, so now I want to go into more details about that issue. I love how the governor is, who's protected by security who has guns and basically is not at risk of being hurt by anybody. Well, much lower risk anyway. I like how she's like, oh, New Yorkers are not being listened to here. No one's saying you have to carry a weapon. It's your choice, but the criminals don't care. So for a person to have the right to defend themselves, I totally agree with that. Okay, this clip I'm going to play for you now, this goes into a little bit more detail about the Supreme Court and just talks about how liberals are freaking out. Here we go.
We're following. The Supreme Court delivering a seismic victory for gun owners and the Second Amendment. Liberal leaders going ballistic over a ruling that is set to rock blue states from coast to coast. The nation's highest court tossing out New York State's restrictive regulations on concealed carry permits and saying Americans have a legal right to carry firearms in public for self-defense. It basically means...
What a concept, being able to defend yourself, as opposed to Trudeau's theory that we are not allowed to defend ourselves.
Millions of people will no longer have to jump through so many hoops if they want to protect themselves. And the bombshell ruling could spread to other blue states like California. The White House and New York leaders furious and lashing out.
Today, the Supreme Court is sending us backwards in our efforts to protect families and prevent gun violence. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. And I'm sorry this dark day has come.
This decision has made every single one of us less safe from gun violence.
Yes, because the blue states are so safe from gun violence as opposed to the red states.
And we cannot allow New York to become the wild, wild west.
We, the president, myself, many of us are deeply concerned and troubled by the Supreme
So that is Kamala Harris talking. Kamala talking.
Court's ruling today. It, I believe, defies common sense and the Constitution.
The fact that the court is coming down with this decision feels tone deaf, and I worry that it undermines the legitimacy of the court.
I am disappointed in the Supreme Court gun decision.
Oh, here's Biden talking. Let's see if he can get through a sentence.
I think it's a bad decision. I think it's not reasoned accurately, but I'm disappointed.
And the ladies of The View are taking their outrage to a whole new level.
Just stop it there for a second. Sorry, guys, that was just an ad playing, so I figured you didn't want to listen to it. Here we go. These are the women from The View and their opinion. I think we know what they're going to say.
Even have the words, it seems stupid. No, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. It's not even stupid. It is. It's such a.
On a side note, what the hell happened to Whoopi Goldberg? She looks unrecognizable these days. Anyway, I digress.
Middle finger to New York.
Judge, what do you think the chances are that Whoopi Goldberg actually read any of the opinion?
You know what? I'd probably wager my house on that one. I really would. I got to tell you, this decision by the United States Supreme Court is a full-throated defense of the Second Amendment. And the Supreme Court is basically saying, this is a constitutional Second Amendment that is explicit. For all of those who are concerned about Roe and they're trying to work it in implicit and kind of it's drawn in and interpreted, this is explicit, where they basically say, you, New York State, you cannot add additional requirements. If someone wants a handgun or a revolver, they come and they get permission for that. You give them that permission. You cannot then say to them, by the way, if you want to carry this gun, then you're going to have to show a special need. And the special need to them is some circumstance where you in particular are subjected to some kind of crime or offense. And the Supreme Court said, no, there is no second test. There is only the first test. 43 states require you to get a license to carry a gun. And they said, that's fine. But you don't go to level 2 and say, and now if you want to carry it, you've got to prove that X, Y, and Z. And the two guys who brought this appeal were guys who were experienced in carrying guns and using guns. One lived in a neighborhood where there were a lot of robberies. And the Supreme Court came down, and I got to tell you, Justice Thomas was like, it wasn't having any of it. He says there is nothing in the Second Amendment that draws a home public distinction with respect to the right to bear arms. And what I think is incredible is in terms of New York, they're saying, and this is a quote from the decision, the respondents attempt to characterize New York's proper cause requirement, that means you have to show more reason to have a gun, as a sensitive place lacks total merit because there is no historical basis for New York to effectively declare the island of Manhattan a sensitive place simply because it's crowded and protected generally by the New York City Police Department.
Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second. In case you don't know, I am very pro Second Amendment. I wish we had it in Canada. A lot of Canadians will disagree with me on this, but just seeing what's happened over the last couple of years, in my opinion, I think we should have the right to defend ourselves at all times, because especially if you look at the last couple of things that happened in Ontario, I just talked about a carjacking happened in Burlington like yesterday. I talked about there was I think another carjacking. No, it wasn't. It was a carjacking actually. That happened in Milton at a gas station where this guy was filling up his gas tank and these thugs took his car, and there's nothing he can do about it, right? So this, I believe you should have the right to protect yourself. And a lot of times the cops, you can say, I'll call the cops. The cops are not going to make it in time. And when you have a fast situation, who knows? Like, think of those carjackings. They could have just pulled the people out, shot them, and left, right? And some people might say, well, that didn't end up happening. Yeah, well, I'd rather not take that risk myself. Let's continue with this.
So that's the answer to Mayor Eric Adams, who's so outraged. I want to know why all these liberals are not outraged by the criminals carrying the illegal guns. And don't tell me that they are, because they're not. They're letting them out of jail to hit the streets again and victimize the rest of us. And
Absolutely, they are letting them out of jail. And look at that Burlington story that I just read to you guys today. One person was from Welland, Ontario, and I can't remember where it said the other guy was from. But again, they're going to have a bail hearing. So they just literally took someone's car at gunpoint, and then they're going to have a chance to get out, because they won't end up doing that again. And that's true. A lot of liberals seem to all they want to do is we got to have more social programs, instead of hitting people hard, like minimum sentences. If anything, violent crime, in my opinion, should have a huge minimum sentence for prison. I don't care what your excuse is. And I'm not one of those guys who thinks drug use should be punished. If you're a violent person, you're a violent offender, I think you should go away for a long, long time. Obviously, depending on what the case is too. But we are so soft on crime in Canada. The States, I don't think they're as soft in the States, in the U.S., but now you guys living in the U.S., correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, it's going to depend on your state as well. But Canada, we just gave $10 million to a former terrorist. What the hell was his name? I can't remember now. And I remember when Trudeau did that, he was, put in the comments what his name was, guys. I can't remember it now. But Trudeau was saying, well, we had to follow the Charter of Rights for that. So this kid was trained as a terrorist with ISIS, I believe. And then he gets $10 million. Whereas, the victims, what do the victims get? The victims get nothing. Let's keep going on here.
I want to read one more quote from this decision. They say that there is in the United States an enduring American tradition that permits a public carry. So don't even question it.
Yeah, Judge makes the point that you don't really hear Kamala Harris or other Democrats talk a lot about inner city shootings. They really don't ever talk about it until today. Now they're extremely concerned about it, Dana.
And she said that it doesn't pass the common sense test, and then she added, or the Constitution. But actually, you just had 6 justices say that it does. And I think the other thing that's happening is that people who didn't read the opinion and gave hot takes, and there were so many hot takes. It was like 150 degrees outside today. There were so many. They weren't looking at what the narrow question was of this. It didn't say that everybody now all of a sudden you're going to be getting a handgun like you were COVID tests. That's not happening. It was very specific. It was very narrow. And I'll tell you, the gun control advocates, they should never have pursued this.
Yeah.
Because, and that was from years ago. I remember learning that they could lose in this case. It takes a long time to get to the Supreme Court. And
I find it funny, too, I'm just going to stop her there, that liberal-minded people always tend to want to group people together. The rights of the individual are rarely ever looked at. And if you don't know what the main difference is between liberal and conservative, liberal is usually about you have to conform with the group, right? Whereas conservatives, again, this is in a nutshell, conservatives tend to respect the rights of the individual. That's what our charter, a Canadian Charter of Rights, is supposed to respect, is the rights of the individual. And a lot of these leftists were just going more and more that way of, well, if you don't like this, then you're a racist, and then they'll start calling you the names and stuff like that, right?
And now you have this. But I couldn't believe Mayor Adams said that we won't have any sleep. Why are they so afraid of law-abiding people? These are people who've already, as the judge just laid out, you pass the background check, you pass the test in order to have your own weapon. The only thing is are you allowed to take it with you? That's the only question. They are law-abiding people, and there will be a lot more to say on this. There's some great commentary. If you want to read something that will help you really understand it, Charles Cook over at National Review has a great piece.
A lot of people, Greg, don't understand how difficult it is to get a handgun here in New York City.
I have to say, I mean, I've gone through.
I'm wondering if this is going to be as difficult as it is in Canada. I'm guessing no, but I think he's going to mention a little bit about it.
Going through the process, and it was a pain in the neck. It still is, but a lot of it had to do with the COVID stuff. Everything kind of shut down, so it's not entirely just the red tape. But I had to jump through a lot of hoops. When Mayor Adams says it's going to be a wild, wild west, I can't imagine it getting worse than it is now, right? I mean, it's like we got, what you said, it's like they're not that upset about the lawbreakers. They're more worried about the law-abiding people. And I'm trying not...
And he makes a good point because, and if you remember 2 years ago, a lot of the riots happening in New York City for the George Floyd stuff, a lot of the shops being broken into and looted. I remember this one guy, there was a video, a young guy, and these guys were just beating the crap out of him, and he was just passed out on the street, and everybody just walked by him. So it's interesting what he says. I do agree with what he says there.
I think about mass shooters. I don't believe, and someone can correct me later, I won't listen, but I don't believe anybody with a concealed carry permit ever committed a mass shooting. And so I think the ban itself had no role in like preventing these things, right? But you could argue that a concealed carry or that could help stop a mass shooting because it creates uncertainty among the suspects. That's why the Aurora shooter skipped a few movie theaters, because he knew that there were guns there. And also we know that just the science of it, the number of people dying in a mass shooting is wholly dependent on the time it takes for a gun to get there.
Right.
And given the fact that at the last shooting in Texas, that the police had the guns and didn't do it, and boy, does that argue for this.
Yeah, and I think I said that in my last video too, right? People who are against conceal and carry, some people are for protecting the schools and just having like armed cops on the outside and stuff like that. But again, if the shit hits the fan and stuff goes down at that school, who's to say that those guards are not going to run away? I don't care how trained you are. You never know, right? They might just go away. So really, in the end, you're responsible for protecting yourself, right?
Because if there had been a person, and this is not to condemn the police, but because there's the fog of war aspect going on. But in this fog of war, there might be somebody within that war, in that room, that might have stopped it, as opposed to the people out there. And then the last word just on Hochul, is that her name? I always Hochul. She's a yokel. She's as sharp as a frisbee. She's done nothing to curb this epidemic of crime in this state. So she has no right to come and complain when the public embraces self-protection as a right. The fact is, you let out repeat offenders, you defund, you reduce penalties for gun crime. Forgive me if I'm going to turn my house into an armed fortress.
Hear, hear. I differ slightly. So let me say this. I think that the court, 6-3 decision, I remind you, Judge, you know as well, Roe v. Wade's a 7-2 decision, so the numbers around the majority are relevant, but if we're going to talk about it, we should talk about all of it. 2, I asked myself a fundamental question, Judge, and you preside and you prosecuted people, and I would ask everyone around the table, because we talked about crime, do you feel safer today knowing that people will be able to take their guns outside their homes, people who we hope are sane? I hope everyone who is out just trying to protect him or herself. But I tell you, I'm not sure I feel safer. And I would pose the question to the table, too. I wonder where police officers and law enforcement are going to come down on this. That's a really interesting question, actually, too, right? Because now they're going to have to deal with more guns. What do you guys think of this? I like the idea of conceal and carry because, again, I just feel like the more time passes, the more crazies that are out there and the more you should be able to protect yourself. What are your thoughts on it? Because I know it's a totally different argument in Canada than it is in the U.S. Some guy commented in the comments yesterday. He was obviously a troll, but he said, why do all handgun owners think that they're American? And I responded to him and I just said, well, what do you mean by that? And of course he didn't give an answer. And then he just started bashing conservatives. But what do you think about this issue? Is conceal and carry a good thing? Do you think it helps these things? Is it only good in the States? Should we have it here? Put it in the comments. I want to know what you guys think. In Congress, law enforcement organizations didn't mind common sense restrictions because they were concerned about criminals and others. And understand, someone who's not a criminal today who takes a gun and uses it for criminal purposes becomes a criminal right after that. So I hear all of the excitement, and I'm not here to pour water on it, but I am here to just offer a couple of questions. Whatever we think about Adams and whatever we think about the police chief and whatever we think about Hochul, I believe they're trying to make the city safer. Are they doing everything they should, Judge? I would agree. You and I would agree on this. I got to disagree with them on that because a lot of these liberals and Democrats, they don't like to punish the people who are hurting innocent people. So I have to disagree with them there. They're not. There are more things they should be doing. But just because we don't like some of the things they're not doing on 2 and 3 other steps doesn't mean that we should gleefully say that this is the right thing for the city. I hope I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to say, God dang it, we should have armed everybody in the city 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago when I moved here. But I'm just not convinced that that's where we're going to end up. And again, I hope I'm wrong.
The answer to your first question is, the question being, do I feel safer? That's not the test. Right.
I just ask if you felt, we talk a lot on this set about issues and issues that impact the issues. I'm just asking, one of the reasons that I read with the Justice Thomas. He talked about incredible. He said that one of the plaintiffs said, like, I want to carry this gun. I live in a neighborhood. I have a neighborhood where there's some crime good. So this guy wanted to protect himself. And the question I ask again, based on that, and because that's an important element to this case, is do we feel safer? And again, I don't know right now. I don't, and I hope I'm proven wrong. And if I'm proven wrong, I'll come right back around this table and say, you guys, you were exactly right.
But it's not a popular.
I think it's an odd question to ask too, because I think since I've owned guns, I don't necessarily feel safer. They're there for preparation if you are going to defend yourself with it. Now, being in Canada, we're not allowed to defend ourselves with our firearms, just so you know that. But it doesn't. I don't think it eliminates. It'll make you feel safer. If anything, there's more of a risk because you've got something that could go wrong. But you're in terms of the U.S. where you can conceal and carry, you've got a weapon to fight back. Nothing is safe in this world. And the whole issue I had with this stupid COVID crap was people now that I know don't ever want to get sick ever again. You're going to get sick. There's risks in this world. If you don't want risk,
you have to be dead, basically. That's the only way you're not going to have any risk. I could pass out right now, hit my head on the floor, and I could be dead, right? It was funny because, well, it's not funny, but I had a friend who his brother-in-law, the sister and the brother got a divorce, and so the brother had died. I was like, well, how did he die? You know how he died? He slipped in the bathtub one day. He just slipped in the bathtub, hit his head, he died. So this whole illusion of feeling safer, I think, is it's dangerous, because I think we do have to realize there are risks. There's always a risk when you're alive. When you head out your door, there's a risk, right? The whole point of being able to conceal and carry is you're taking an extra step to prepare if there is a bad situation that comes up. Would you feel safer? I don't know. Maybe you would, maybe you won't.
Popularity contest when something is guaranteed by the Constitution. You see, it's not whether or not we agree.
Well, and Heller, Scalia didn't say, and Heller, he didn't say it was absolute.
And
even the concurring opinions, but Mr.
in this decision, they support Heller and McDonald, and I don't want to get into the
Can I just point out one thing? Yes, something happened in this show for the first time in the history of all cable television.
What's that?
You had a panelist saying, "I don't know the answer." So you have to give points for Harold for saying that, because he.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. Okay, next clip I want to talk about. This is Dan Bongino. If you don't know who he is a conservative in the United States. Used to be Secret Service for the president. I think it could have been for Bush or Clinton. I can't remember. So he's got experience with all these law enforcement agencies. So he gives his take on Uvalde and what happened. So I'll play that for you here.
People magazine, of all places, got an exclusive with one of the officers on the scene. And it says a lot about what happened. And as I process it based on my law enforcement experience in both the NYPD and the Secret Service, and in my time later on dealing with people in leadership positions, I think I've kind of drawn some conclusions. Let's go to the People magazine article first. So they got an exclusive with one of the police officers at the scene. The author of the piece, a guy named Steve Helling, People magazine, it says, the headline is, "We felt like cowards." A police officer talks about the decision to delay officer response to Uvalde shooting. That's obviously been an enormous, growing controversy. Why did they wait? That is not taught anywhere anymore in active shooter scenarios, to wait. It's just not taught. So everybody's wondering, how? So, from the police officer, one of them who was on the scene, they set it up first. They say, but not all the officers agreed with Arredondo's decision. He was the tactical commander on the scene, and it was his decision, obviously, to not go in. One of the officers who was standing outside the school says that he and his colleagues discussed whether to go into the school anyway. Listen to this, quote, "There was almost a mutiny," the officer tells People Mag here. "We were like, there's an effing gunman in this school. We hear gunshots and we're just going to stand here with our thumbs up our asses? We want to go in and save lives." It was the most frustrating situation in my entire career.
So I talked about this on the video yesterday too. So obviously there's a huge chain of command issue, because a lot of these cops did want to go in there to get that gunman.
Now, it's going to be a tough segment, but an important one. I know it's a Tuesday and it's a summer, but this is stuff we need to address. I'm telling you my time in law enforcement. This is not some attempt, folks, to put lipstick on anything, no less a tragedy. But the guys I worked with, not every one of them, but the overwhelming majority of guys I work with. How do I say this? I got to be careful, guys, because I want to be very cautious with my words. The guys I knew, they weren't eager for a fight, but I'm telling you right now, if a fight came their way, they were sure as not going to run away from it. They had trained for this. We had trained for this. The scenarios I'd been in that had been stressful, not stressful like this, by the way, but stressful. These guys lived for that moment. If you're in law enforcement or military or some paramilitary organization, you know what I'm talking about. They're not eager for a fight, But when that fight comes their way, they know their entire career they've been training for this. There's an anxious nervousness there, but that nervousness isn't a fear. It's just that this is what we train for. This is what we do. And that's why when I heard this story of 19 officers, you know, basically stacked up outside the classroom, inside the school, but not going in, I said to myself, this does not comport with the reality I know of what it was like to be with these guys, where they would have jumped over each other to get in there first. I'm telling you, I know these guys were not, they just aren't like that. So now when I read this, I'm like, now it makes sense. This was a leadership call. Now, you may say to yourself, and fairly enough, this is where we tie it all together. Okay, well, it was beyond obvious at this point that this guy, Arredondo, the guy on the scene who made the decision not to go in and to treat him like a barricaded subject, he wasn't. He was still an active shooter, right? That decision was obviously catastrophic. Why did they listen? Because, folks, you got to keep in mind that training people in military and paramilitary organizations and law enforcement as well, chain of command is everything. It's everything. Anyone in the military listening right now can tell you that. It's the same thing in law enforcement. Chain of command is everything because you're going to ask people in law enforcement and in the military, domestically and overseas, for our warfighters overseas, you're going to ask them to do really difficult, unbelievably stressful, counterintuitive things like, hey, that guy's shooting a gun, go get him. When guys shoot guns, what do people do? They run away from the guns. You don't want to get shot. Not cops and not military. They hear the gunshots, they go to it. That is not instinct to do that. Your instinct's to seek cover or concealment and stay alive. So to get people to do those counterintuitive, against human instinct things, you have to teach them to obey orders under almost every circumstance, outside of an obviously immoral and ethical order. The question is, was this one of those orders? Obviously, people on the scene weren't sure. So I want you to I'm not, again, please, I am in no way putting lipstick on anything. This was beyond a bad call. It was a deadly bad call.
And if you're not sure what he's talking about, they waited for 50 minutes before going in to get the shooter. So that, you know, they could have taken him out early on, and then he ended up killing all those kids. So that's what he's talking about with the waiting period.
It's one of the few times I support, at least federally and state, there should be a federal and state full investigation so that we can get some best practices going forward so this never, ever happens again. But I want you to remember, in organizations where chain of command and following orders is everything, bad orders equal bad outcomes. Bad orders mean you're going to follow them. That doesn't always equal the case in the private sector, where bad orders equal the boss sometimes gets fired and you see a mutiny by the staff and things change. That's not the way it works in law enforcement. And it speaks to one thing here: the critical importance of good frontline leadership. You can have the best police chief on the planet. You can have the best 4-star in the military on planet Earth. If you don't have quality frontline leadership, your first lieutenants in the military and your sergeants and lieutenants in the police departments, if you do not have good frontline leadership, you've got nothing.
He kind of sounds like our liberal government, actually, with their terrible job of running our country right now.
You've got nothing. You can have the best sheriff, the best 4-star, the best 1-star, the best commander in extremis. If you do not have frontline leadership out there in charge of small groups of men who are going to implement your plans, you've got nothing. So the conclusions I came up with were, I don't believe these guys were cowards. I don't. I believe it was bad, awful, deadly leadership combined with confusion and that fog of war. And then finally, a bunch of board tack guys that showed up and said, we're not obeying these orders anymore, we're going in.
Okay, so I'll stop it there. Yeah, I have to agree with him. I don't think the cops were cowards in this case because, again, you've got the example of that border agent who ended up going in because his wife was one of the teachers, and then also when you've got that many cops, I like he said, like they go through all this training. I can't see them just being afraid of going to the gunshots. Like think of all the tragedies that we've seen in our lives, and every time the cops are running towards the danger, the firefighters are running towards the danger, right? So clearly they are obviously being held back, and that's a leadership decision. Tragic about what happened. And again, obviously more answers are eventually going to come out about this. But anyway, I want to share with you what Bongino had to say. He's usually got some interesting stuff to say. I'm going to end the episode on that note for tonight. You know what? Sorry, guys. I forgot to mention Tamara Lich. Sorry, I got one more clip for you. This one's about 6 minutes long. So, again, if you're going to tune out, just please remember to like or subscribe. But for the Freedom Convoy people, take a listen to this one.
I have here today a Canadian freedom-fighting hero, Tamara Lich. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And this is from Bright Light News.
Yeah, so we're gathered together today because you just won a prestigious award from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, the George Joyce Award for Freedom. How does it feel to have been honored in this way today?
It's quite overwhelming. It's a lot. The support, from an organization like the Justice Center, to be in the company of the previous winners. When I got the email, I was in tears because I just couldn't believe it. It's a great honor for me to receive this award from them. And I don't consider it as my personal award. I consider this to be an award for every freedom-loving Canadian that supports human rights and freedoms.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible and has resonated through all the Canadians who are looking at their dwindling freedoms is your love and fight for everybody. You have sacrificed yourself, put yourself at the forefront of things. Can you give Canadians an update?
Keep in mind, too, for those of you who don't know, she was arrested. She didn't go violently. She was part of the protests in Ottawa. I think it was the OPP. They came to arrest her. She went, no problems at all. And it took her a few weeks to get her bail hearing, which is a complete joke because, again, I mentioned those carjacking suspects, and they're going to get their bail hearing no problem, right? So anyway, let's just continue.
And the world, an update on how you're doing because, you were kind of incognito for a while.
Yes, I've been keeping kind of a low profile, which is okay. Yeah. It's been really busy, obviously, since we got back from my adventure, and I've been back to work and staying positive. I felt really protected and guided throughout the events of the last few months, and so I just I'm really positive. Don't let much get me down, and we just deal with things one day at a time. And I have faith. I have faith that it'll all work out. Yeah. One way or the other.
Yeah. Well, again, that's what shines through is this warrior spirit in you to fight for everybody's freedoms. Can you tell us, looking now at the state of Canada, what do you feel about our democracy, where things are heading?
I think we're in trouble, obviously, but I don't think we're past the point of no return. I think Canadians need to get involved on every level, civic, municipal, provincial, federal. They need to get involved, and they need to speak up and take action, I guess, insofar as sitting on those boards and providing another perspective, right?
I think that's the biggest challenge with our with the Canadian population is we don't have enough people who want to get involved in politics. Most people can't even have a proper debate without not talking to each other again or agreeing to disagree. But a lot of people are very complacent in this country and in the US as well. I feel like, based on what I see, I feel like more people are involved in the USA. And let's face it, the USA politics are a lot more, I guess, action-packed would be the word. Canadian politics tends to be a lot more slow, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Help me out with that, with what the word I'm looking for here, guys. But look at the Ontario election that just happened. It was the lowest voter turnout like apparently I think they said ever. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But again, most normal people just want to live their lives. They don't want to bother getting involved, right? Let's face it, like politics are stressful. And how often do you get angry when you watch these clips and you watch what these politicians do? And they don't think of the I guess the perils of the common man, right? And it's funny because I remember a couple of people during the federal election, they're like, oh, you should run for, when PPC was looking for people, they're like, you should run for, be a member. I go, no way, man. I said, that would just be too stressful. The problem is most of the people who want to get into politics are usually the worst people to get in there, right? Because they're the people who desire power and stuff like that. So it's like a catch-22. I'm just going to continue with this here.
And again, always, I think, just looking out for each other and taking care of each other, and yeah.
This is a theme that's running through all the people who are the diamonds of humanity coming out to fight for all of our collective freedoms. They're all saying, you need to get involved, whether municipally, locally, or on a grander level by joining organizations, starting your own organizations, right? Now, how do you feel about the mandates that are being suspended and lifted now? A lot of people are kind of feeling like, oh, we've got some respite, that things are getting better. Do you think things are changing for the better, or do you think there's something else happening?
So if you don't know what he's talking about the COVID vaccine mandates. Where unvaccinated people are allowed to go on planes now, but it is just suspended. It hasn't. You can tell they're probably going to bring it back in September or October or whenever they feel is convenient. Also, getting rid of the mask mandates here. For those people in the U.S., in Ontario, we just got rid of the mask mandates. I think it was like a month ago or something like that. And we're like one of the last places in the world to get rid of those mask mandates. And you could tell, I even see people, you know how many people, today was a pretty warm day. I see people still in their cars driving with their mask on and sitting outside. The other day was like 40 degrees Celsius. I see people walking outside with their mask on. And I'm just like, you do know that's probably worse for you, right? And again, hey man, you want to wear your mask? Great. Don't force me to wear mine. That's my big issue with the mask stuff.
I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm concerned with the word suspended because they have not been revoked, which tells me that they can implement it again at any time. So it's a step in the right direction, put it that way. Yeah. But I mean, I don't think the proverbial battle is over. Right. And that's what I was saying about, joining organizations and working together and being together. I mean, we have to be vigilant against those things because they're our rights and freedoms. And if we don't protect them, nobody else is going to protect them.
Mm-hmm. And so you drove in from
Medicine Hat.
Yeah, Medicine Hat. You weren't able to fly, obviously, yet. It's not June 20th yet. Right. But, how does that feel having to drive through for you?
It was amazing. One thing that I can note is that Canada has become very small to me now because where I work along the #1 highway. So I see a lot of people that I know that'll stop in and say hi or have coffee on the way. And I was really excited to make the drive. I didn't get to see a lot of it back in the winter, the drive out. And it's beautiful. And it just makes me so proud. And I drive through these provinces. It's going to make me emotional because it's just, I drive through these provinces and it's such a beautiful country. And the people are so friendly, right? And they really are. And my husband and I were commenting on it on the way out. We stopped at a few places in Ontario for fuel and whatnot. And they're just friendly and chatty and, have a nice day. And I mean, it's worth fighting for. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you, again, have inspired so many people, and the people who are fighting, I think this is a relevant theme that everyone is noticing, that everybody within this movement that is awake to what is happening is the open-minded, friendly, compassionate person who's willing to open their hearts and a conversation with anybody, regardless of what side of the fence they're on in terms of the mandates or freedoms. And this is something that's really come out. Is there a final message that you'd like to give Canadians? Because, and the world, again, it was incredible during the time a few months ago where, there were people outside the English embassy calling out your name and holding signs for you. I mean, the support has been amazing. So any messages to all these people who are your supporters and have been worried about how you and your welfare?
Yeah, I just want them to know that I'm doing great. Like I said, I'm staying very positive. I have a lot of faith that everything will work out as it should work out. And my message has always been peace, right? Peace, love, work together. When you see somebody down, help them up, right? Look after each other. And I think that's how we win.
Words of wisdom, words of a warrior, a freedom fighter. Thank you so much for everything you're doing, Tamara Lich.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so that's Tamara Lich. Yeah, it sounds like a really radical extremist, doesn't she? And so if you don't know who she is, she was one of the people who organized the trucker convoy to Ottawa back in February of 22. She went to prison for, I think it was like a month or something like that. So obviously she has some parole conditions going on. But I still hear people on the radio, mostly liberal radio, talking about how these extremist truckers and all that. And it just shows you how ignorant some people are. And it's kind of scary times that we're in right now. So, but it's scary, but it's actually hopeful at the same time, because again, a lot more people are getting involved, but we still need more people to get involved in politics. So I'm going to end it there for the night, guys. So please like or subscribe and share if you got value out of this video. Sorry for it being so long again, but there's just a lot of news going on. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will talk to you soon.